Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the 26th Annual Animal Law Conference. And if you could please take your seats, we're going to get started with our program tonight. And really excited to be here in Chicago, which is my hometown, so I'm especially proud. And with me to welcome everyone is Pam Frosch, who is the Associate Dean for Animal Law at Lewis & Clark Law School, and also the Executive Director of the Center for Animal Law Studies at Lewis & Clark. So we are here to welcome you, and we'll be introducing our esteemed keynote speaker this evening, Seth Tibbetts, as well. This conference happens every year, as most of you know, and it is a joint production of the Animal Legal Defense Fund and the Center for Animal Law Studies at Lewis & Clark, and also the Student Animal Legal Defense Fund chapter at Lewis & Clark Law School. And this year, we want to give special thanks to our sponsor for tonight's get-together, Tim Medura of the Brooks Institute, who I think is out there somewhere. Hello, Tim. And the Brooks Institute is a brand new entity that is seeking to create a paradigm shift in animal rights law and policy. And so Tim is leading that effort as the president and CEO of the Brooks Institute. He has also generously sponsored the student convention, which was held earlier today, this year's. And I think we had somewhere in the neighborhood of 100 law students turn out from that, from far-flung places all the way as far away as India, I'm told. So very excited about that. And the Brooks Institute also sponsored the student convention last year, so thank you very much for that. I also want to thank Miyoko, who is also here with us tonight. Very excited about that. And Miyoko generously donated all of that wonderful, amazing Miyoko's cheese that we've all been enjoying. So I hope you got some. In addition to me being excited about the conference for the first time ever being held here in Chicago, I'm also excited because for the first time ever, my dad got to attend. So my dad, Norm Wells, is here tonight. And And, you know, every year there is a lot to talk about between the annual animal law conferences that we hold. Major changes, major shifts in awareness, and major legal changes are happening every year. It's a really exciting time to be involved. So there is never a shortage of fodder to talk about at the Animal Law Conference, and it's just an exciting field to be involved in. A couple of changes that have taken place that the Animal Legal Defense Fund was responsible for making happen. We had a great victory in January of this year when we won our ag-gag lawsuit, and I'm sure most of you are familiar with ag-gag laws, and we won at the Ninth Circuit. So for the first time at the Federal Circuit, we overturned Idaho's ag-gag law. So that was a very exciting event for us. And then in April of this year, we also had an exciting victory in the Eighth Circuit Federal Court of Appeals when we won a case. We'd filed a case against a horrible little roadside zoo called Cricket Hollow in Iowa. And the lawsuit involved applying the Endangered Species Act, which most of you are familiar with, to protect animals in captivity. And so that was the argument we were making, and I'm happy to say in April, the Eighth Circuit Court of Appeals agreed with our argument, therefore setting precedent at the federal level that the Endangered Species Act does indeed apply to captive as well as wild animals of listed species. And amongst the many exciting panels we'll have, there are some of the architects, direct architects of those victories, including our litigation director, Matthew Liebman, attorney Matthew Strugar is here, who was a key player in our ag-gag lawsuit as well, and many other people like that. And that's what this conference is about, really, networking and learning from the people doing the work. So I want to allow Pam to talk about some of the amazing things that the Center for Animal Law Studies is doing, and also some of the great things that are happening at the academic level as well. So I'll turn it over to Pam.
Thank you, Steve, and welcome. Welcome. So at Lewis and Clark Law School, we're very, very fortunate to be in a place where we take animal law education really seriously, and our goal is to create an army of animal law advocates. And so it's wonderful because we've been able to develop over 25 classes. We have the world's only LLM program. We have a summer school program. We have all sorts of really exciting things to do at Lewis and Clark. And this year, we have a wonderful LLM class, and I want to give a special shout out to them because we have students from South Africa, Kenya, Uganda, Zimbabwe, India, and Australia. If all of you can raise your hands and raise your voices and let everybody know where you are. There you go. And these are experienced lawyers doing amazing work all over the world. So find them, talk to them, develop collaborations and partnerships with them. They're wonderful. We also have some wonderful JD students who are here tonight. And can we also get some hands and some voices of our JD students from Lewis and Clark? Yes. And what we want all of you, even if you're not at Lewis and Clark, we want you to engage with our program because there's a lot we can do together and there's a lot you can do with us. So please reach out to the students, whether they be LLM or JD students. And also I want to just give a shout out to some of our professors and staff who are also here. Professor Kathy Hessler, who's also the director of the Animal Law Clinic, is right there. Stand up. Stand up. Professor Raj Reddy, who's also the director of our LLM program. Where are you, Raj? There you are. Professor Russ Mead, are you here? An ethics expert. Is he here this evening? If not, we know he's going to be here later. The director of strategic initiatives, Pam Hart. Where are you, Miss Pam Hart? There you are. Our Aquatic Animal Law Initiative Fellow, Becky Jenkins. Becky, where are you? Are you here? There you are. And I'm going to claim her, Steve. For spring semester, we have the mother of animal law teaching animals in agriculture as our visiting professor, Joyce Tischler. Where are you, Joyce? And of course, I want to give a shout out to all of the attorneys and staff at ALDF. All of you that are here from ALDF, can you please raise your hands and raise your voices so people know where you are? Wonderful. So please go and talk to everybody. That's what's so important about this conference, is really making those connections and learning from each other, because these are our colleagues for the future and how we're all going to change the world together. So please do that. So one of the things that I've seen in animal law education is the amazing power of one. We've seen so many times how a single law student or a single attorney can make a huge difference. And so it's very exciting for me this evening to introduce the keynote speaker this evening, who talk about power of one. Yeah. Seth Tibbett is a true trailblazer. He founded Tofurkey in 1980, before most of you were born. And he's been at the forefront of creating affordable, delicious plant-based meat alternatives ever since. And his story is extraordinary, and it's one you want to hear him tell. So I'm not going to go into a whole big list of his accomplishments, but Steve and I would like to share a few personal anecdotes just to give you an idea of the impact that he has had on both of us and so many that we know. So first of all, I want to go back to the year 1995. Again, before most of you were born. But let me tell you, Tofurkey came out with its very first holiday roast in time for Thanksgiving. Game changer. Finally, we had something we could eat that was really delicious at the holidays, so thank you, Seth, for that. And speaking of the mid-'90s, I think Mr. Steve Wells had an interesting story to share.
Yes, I do indeed. I'm happy to make you aware of this story. So I was living in Alaska for 10 years, and that's where I decided to become a vegan in 1997. Of course, we're all for sure aware of what a vegan-friendly state Alaska is, especially 22 years ago. So there weren't a lot, we didn't have Miyoko's cheese, and there weren't a lot of products available, but it was so exciting. We heard about this Tofurkey roast, and so, when the holidays came around, we ordered by FedEx. We got it frozen from FedEx. We got the Tofurkey, the whole meal with the gravy and everything, and we were so excited. And so the second year we did that, we were kind of doing some advocacy, so we decided to let the hometown paper know. And the Anchorage Daily News did a front page story on our little Tofurkey meal that we invited a bunch of friends to. And so we sort of at least put veganism on the map in Alaska. But it was amazing. It was amazing. It made advocacy so much easier. So I'm really happy now, fast forward to this year, and the Animal Legal Defense Fund is representing Tofurkey as well as the Good Food Institute and the ACLU of Missouri in a lawsuit to overturn that state's completely absurd law. They have passed a law that would define meat as only slaughtered animals. And this is a direct shot across the bows of the great plant-based alternatives that are coming out, as well as what we all know will be the future of food as well with cell-cultured alternatives. So we're happy it's come full circle. Glad to be working with you, Seth.
And I have one last story that's very, very recent. Just a few weeks ago, I was talking to Seth, and I said, "Hey, Seth, I'm going to be heading to Helsinki." And he stopped me in my tracks, and he said, "You're going to Helsinki?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "This is what you do. You arrive in the airport, you depart the plane, and you find the nearest McDonald's, and you order a McVegan." I'm like, "Oh," and he goes, "Yeah, because there are only 2 places that have the McVegan, and Helsinki's one of them." Now, I have not been to a McDonald's in literally decades, but when Seth Tibbett tells you to go to the McDonald's in Helsinki, you go to the McDonald's in Helsinki. So I did. And darned if it wasn't pretty good. Not as good as Tofurkey, though, I must say. So even after 38 years in the business, Seth continues to lead the way in the latest trends in vegan and vegetarian food and continues to innovate in ways that benefit the animals, humans, and the environment, and we're so very grateful. Please help us welcome Mr. Seth Tibbett.
Okay. Whoa! Quite an introduction, thank you. It's so good to be here, and what an honor to be in such awesome veganness. Thank you all for being so awesome and being so vegan, I want to talk about the future, but, when I got this invitation to talk, it was kind of before this Missouri thing comes up, and I got to be honest with you, it kind of creeps me out a little bit to be this close to Missouri right now because, they're talking about jail time, and I'm like, jail time? Who goes to jail at Tofurkey? It can't be Jamie. He's got kids. It can't be Rachel. She's got kids. It's probably me. I developed the name. So I was a little worried, but then I thought, you know what? I'm going to be in a room full of lawyers. So it's probably okay. So strength in numbers. If they come to the door, please block them out. All right, I want to talk about our vegan future because I've been thinking a lot about the future, I thought it would be kind of an easy sell to this group of awesome veganists, but in talking this afternoon to some of these guys, I realized, these guys are also lawyers, and they're pretty rational. So I've got to make a case for the future because I'm going to be your basic lawyer here, and I'm going to try and sell this to you because I have two things going for me, I figure. One, I'm 67 years old. You know, never thought I'd really be 67 years old, but voila. And so I've seen a bigger swath of history. I've lived through some bigger swath of history than you guys have. And then, you know, the other thing is I've been reading a lot. I did a pretty deep dive recently, and I just wanted to follow plant-based foods back in history, because my rationale is this, that like Winston Churchill said, the further back you look, the further forward you can see. So I'm going to go back in time, even before I was around, which is 1809. The Reverend William Cowherd, how's that for a vegan name, walked into his church out there by Liverpool, England, and he goes to this congregation. He says, you know, I've been reading Genesis, and it's right at the front of the Bible, and it says, but flesh with the life thereof, which is the blood thereof, shall ye not eat. And that's pretty, like, straightforward. And he said, and from this day forward, if you want to be part of this church, you can't eat any flesh. And after they picked their jaws up off the floor, you know, they were all like stricken, like, what? What are we going to eat? It's like they take your photo when you're skydiving out of an airplane. Everybody's like, no meat. But they went along with them, and then it wasn't 1 week later that the Reverend Hindmarsh, also a nice name, started calling it the Beefsteak Chapel, and all you vegan and vegetarian, or it wasn't even that, it was like plant eater or flesh non-eaters, are going to die. So it was like, you know, plant-based foods was like a week old, and they were all already asking, where do you get your protein? So after about 8 years of this, they, his other reverend, the Metcalf, also a vegan name, Metcalf, they went to sea, and they said, I'm going to go over to America. So they took 79 days as a vegetarian back then. And the crew is all, of course, they're eating like salted meat. And they're like, hey, you want some of this salted meat, you plant eaters? And they're teasing them the whole way across. I mean, I get upset when the vegan meal doesn't arrive, and I'm, 9 hours in a plane. I'm sitting in a chair in the sky, and there's no vegan food, and I'm all pissed off. These guys were 79 days at sea with these horrible people. So they land in Philadelphia, and they set up shop. They never really, became like a big church, but they were a beachhead. They were the first beachhead in the U.S. for the plant-based foods, and they wrote these beautiful hymns like this one right here. So if you'll turn to page 352 in your hymnals, we'll now sing Onward Vegan Soldiers. So those guys started it, and one of the big parishioners there was this guy Graham, Sylvester Graham, beautiful name, Sylvester. And it is the same guy that did the graham cracker, and he wanted to be a priest, but then he became like a vegan lecturer, and he went all over the country talking about veganism. He kind of took it out of the church and he secularized it. He was like a vegan rock star. But he, his big things were bland diet, no booze, and sex more than once a month is pathological. And he couldn't understand why they didn't get more people involved in his thing. But he did get Oberlin College to put his diet into the dining hall. And so they had this bland graham diet in there for months, and then this one professor came in and he goes, I'm sneaking in some pepper. And he put pepper in there, he got caught, he was fired on the spot. So for putting pepper in his food. He was also big in bread. The bread was just turning white. It was going from brown, healthy bread into white. He was against that. So bakers hated him as well as the butchers. Women a lot attended his talks, though, and they found a lot of meaning in his talks. But he was hassled everywhere he went. He had boarding houses where you could eat vegetarian food, and it was very tied in to the abolitionists and suffragists. If you were eating plants back then, you were probably also an abolitionist, a pacifist, and for women's suffrage, including Sarah and Angelina Grimke, who would eat no coffee. They'd take no coffee, tea, or sugar because those were slave-produced products. So they were very righteous, the vegans back then. But one thing Graham hated was doctors, and after his era and time, back in the 1840s, it became the product of doctors who sort of took over, and they started doing medical studies and saying, this is also a pretty healthy diet. And Graham had hated fruit, too. He was also a Bible Christian, by the way. But one of the big experiments that he did was in the 1840s, they bought 90 acres. They said, everything's in the cities. We've got to get back to the land. And so they developed fruit land. And they were city folks, and they were very idealistic. They were saying, we got 90 acres. We're going to have no animals. We're going to just do all the work ourselves. We only wear linen clothes. We can't wear wool because it's animals. We can't go cotton because it's slave-produced. We're wearing linen. Not only that, we're going to go and eat upward growing veggies only, no downward veggies where you have to pull them up out of there and you got to kill the plants. So it was very idealistic. And we're going to drink cold water and bathe in cold water because that's happening too. So very strict. And they had 13 people, and it was like a reality show. It would have been great. Like one guy was like a farmer who was just out of jail for not cutting his beard. They had a nudist who was always getting in trouble that they were trying to get to wear a sheet during the day. They had a Catholic priest and a guy with Tourette's syndrome that went around cursing all the time. So it was quite a crew. I mean, that would be made for TV, central casting. The only other woman, aside from Abigail May, who was this big suffragist, and the mother, by the way, of Louisa May Alcott, who wrote Little Women. And she was the only woman, other than this woman, that got caught eating fish with a neighbor, and they ixnayed her out of there like as soon as she could. And the thing about that doomed the commune, they were really into, gender issues, but the men would sit around a lot of times and they'd talk philosophy, and they'd go out on the road, and they'd go to Rhode Island, and they'd, give these lectures right when the barley was getting ready. And so the women ended up doing the work, and Abigail threatened to leave with the kids at one time, and that's what killed us. So they only lasted 7 months, but it wasn't long. Though Thoreau and Emerson both visited, and they said, they were teaching the children, stop eating flesh and you will stop war. So that was their big thing. In 1850, there was a movement on May 15th in New York City. Vegetarians from all over the country met at this convention to tell their conversion stories, like, I've not eaten flesh in 20 years, I've not eaten flesh in 40 years, and my whole family's not eaten flesh. So they needed a word, and so they invented the word vegetarianism. Before that time, there was no word for vegetarianism. And they had that, and then the question arose, what about milk and eggs? Can you be a vegetarian and still eat milk and eggs? And to compromise and to bring in more people, they said, yeah, you can be a vegetarian and eat milk and eggs. So that's where that kind of philosophy really comes from. They had a big banquet, that was also very tasty. It was really the first time they'd really focused on taste, because before it was like all bland food. They were closely aligned to abolition and women's suffrage movement. They gave free ads to women's suffrage groups. And they had articles like this one from this suffragist, Ann Denton, who argued, she goes, meat stunts social growth. It makes it impossible for the soul to expand or the heart to enlarge if every avenue is clogged by flesh, while every truth must pass through the grains and blood of mangled animals. Women, take charge of your life and become more than a fashion doll or a cooking machine, which was very progressive for then. And, yeah. And by the way, I just want to recognize one person here, which is a Tofurkey gal, which is Rachel Perman, who has really, done so much for the Me Too movement, and there's been this discussion like, should animals, should this movement be talking about women's issues and all this sexual thing? And she's really led the charge, and it's been very hard on her, and just very proud of the work she's done. So good job, Rachel. Oops, there we go. So the Civil War was in the wind, and that kind of changed things. You know, it moved, sort of vegetarianism reinvented itself, and it turned into more of a health thing, like what can we do to the individual? This was really, there was no commercial products at this time. If you were eating, you know, plants, you didn't have anywhere to go. So this guy up in upstate New York, whose name was James Caleb Jackson, and he had a sanitarium up there where you'd go and you'd take the cool waters and you'd eat good food and go out there feeling great. He invented this product called Granola, not granola, but Granola. And his advertising needed a little work because it was like he used Graham flour from Graham, and the thing was, it was so tough you had to soak it overnight, which you may not have wanted to lead with that on your ad. It was like, not only does it taste bad, but it's inconvenient too. But it was a start, and it was disrupting the ham and eggs breakfast that everybody ate back then. One of the visitors, the many visitors that came up there, was John Harvey Kellogg, who paid him a visit and was very interested in this granola. And so a couple years later, he goes back to Battle Creek, Michigan, where he has a sanitarium as well, and he creates granola again. Jackson sues granola, and so back then he says, okay, granola. Are you happy now? That's enough difference. I mean, lawyers, you guys hadn't really developed so much yet, because I don't think that would fly today. But he and his wife, Ella, who was a great woman suffragist as well, hygienist, author, cook, they believed in vegetarian diets, temperance, no booze again, and once again, no sex. It's amazing that any of you are here today, given the little amount of sex these vegetarian people had back then, but voila, here we are. They drank soy milk every day. They loved soy milk, and he noticed that acidophilus culture grew better on soy milk than animal milk. And in Toronto, Canada, right as he was developing that, there was the Dion Quince. There were 5 babies born to this one mother. Very famous, big news. One of them got sick and it had stomach problems. And he sent him a bunch of soy acidophilus culture, and cleared it right up. So that was one of the things, too. You know, he also, like, I gotta say, maybe wasn't the best copywriter, thoroughly cooked and partially digested. What? Like, is it birds, like, that vomit into their mouth, a partially digested foods? I don't know. But he did point out 1 pound of granola was more than equals 3 pounds of the best beef. So he was in a granola. And granola didn't have to be soaked overnight, but it was still a little tough, so he started messing around with a product with corn and flakes. And his brother, Will, was more than happy to take that and develop it into an empire. In 1895, Secretary Dabney of the U.S. Department of Agriculture was worried about a meat shortage. If we only had that problem today. He liked Kellogg, and he said, could you develop some products that were plant-based? And so Harvey and Ella went to work, and they created Nut Toast, which was peanut flour-based cutlet, and you could slice it and dice it, flavor it like beef, flavor it like chicken, whatever. And it was made from nuts, which, note to Missouri, they called the edible portion of the nut in 1895 nut meat. So, Missouri, go talk to the nut meat people and then come talk to us, maybe. But a can of this cost like 30 cents, which was a nickel cheaper than meat. And Clara Barton, the Civil War nurse, she was a big fan. She said, tastes like all the naughty things, but it's digestible and wholesome. I don't know what naughty thing she was talking about, but whatever. So they were selling this in cans, mail order, all over the United States, and it was a big thing. But to give you an idea of the scale, in 1904, they were selling 200,000 pounds of this, which at Tofurkey now would be a slow week. So it was just, getting going. Then, right here in Chicago, the first Tofurkey, these guys beat me to the punch there. And Chicago became actually the mecca for vegetarianism in the 1890s. And it was really, it had been like a grassroots movement to that time, and now this was like the wealthy and the philanthropic people that were members of that, and they believed that the diet would produce like moral and industrious workers and everything. And they had a World's Fair here in 1893 that people from all over the world, vegetarians from all over the world came, and they had a first ever vegetarian congress right there, which really excited everybody. And then at Thanksgiving, they followed that up with this big party somewhere in Chicago where they had all this lovely food. And the turkey was made from chestnuts, turnips, potatoes, and carrots and spices. So it was really amazing. The big dream, though, of these guys after this vegetarian congress met was, wouldn't it be great if there was like a restaurant where you could just go in and you could eat vegetarian food? And vegetarianism was in the, getting to be profitable commercially, and in Chicago there was great movement to that effect. And in 1895, the first restaurant in the United States opened up, the vegetarian restaurant, and it was called aptly Vegetarian Restaurant Number 1. Again, marketing, market, come on. 5 years later, right here in Chicago, there were 7 vegetarian restaurants that opened up, including the famous Mortimer's Pure Food. And they employed 50 people in that restaurant. And looking at those prices, I can see why. Spaghetti, 10 cents. Boiled new potatoes, 20. That's a pretty good deal. And they were really, this movement sort of spread all throughout Chicago, but then also the U.S. And it was helped by the high cost of meat and the slaughterhouse scandals that where Upton Sinclair was writing about. He was really the first undercover investigator, and he went into these slaughterhouses originally to expose like work conditions of the people. And he actually, what the people latched onto was the meat and how nasty it was. So he always said, I aimed at the heart, but I hit the stomach with this book, The Jungle. And by the end of 1904, there were 57 vegetarian restaurants in America. This is sort of, debatable whether this was the first health food store, but they marketed as such. Good job, Lust. And he was a doctor who had tuberculosis, and he went to Germany and had it cured by water. And he came back and he started health food stores, health food bakeries, and hospitals, schools, and he ended up founding the American Naturopathic Association, which includes over 4,000 members today. And there's a lot more to be said here, but I think you're getting the picture of where vegetarianism came from. And in World War I, the movement kind of died down, and other things were on people's mind, but really it was the Adventists that kept the ball rolling for the next, 20, 30 years until really in the 1970s and 80s, we found out about it. And that was the year that I started Tofurkey. And I was, I loved tempeh, and I had been making it at home, but I was inspired from a marketing standpoint about granola, because in college, in 1973, I was working at trying to work my way through college at the local head shop. And that was the only place in my college town where you could buy granola. It was like right under the pipes and the rolling papers, there was these rainbow bags of granola. And people would come in, and they go, I'll take a pipe and a zigzag and give me a bag of granola. I'm going to be hungry later on, And so granola was like that. And then 5 years later, I went back and the grocery stores had shelves and shelves of granola. It was amazing. So I was like, tempeh is going to be the same thing. But, in 1980, there was really no products of any natural food kind in the supermarkets. There was no soy milk, no cheese, no tempeh, no tofu. There was barely even yogurt, like from cows. So it was a very kind of like ground zero for this new movement, but it was just taking off. Whole Foods Market was started in that same time, and then PETA was also, that was the year PETA was founded, which really changed the landscapes, a great deal. I think Gene Bauer was still selling vegan hot dogs at Grateful Dead concerts at that time, and there was really no farm sanctuaries until that too. So it was a very, different time. And so I put in $2,500. I went into business making tempeh, and I like business to me. I was like not a business guy, so I thought, you know what? It wouldn't be a bad idea if I took like a business class, and because I was like a teacher naturalist, and so I went to this room just like this, and there was like 200 entrepreneurs, and the Small Business Administration was doing this thing, and they go, this guy comes out in a three-piece suit, and he's got all these big rings on, and he starts out, and I'm sitting near the front, and he goes, how many of you entrepreneurs are out there to save the world? And I was like, yes. And he was like, oh, that was a rhetorical question, right? And then he goes, how many of you are out here to make money? And everybody was like, woohoo! And they were like so charged. And I was like, God, this business is harder than I thought. It was like, I've only been in here 5 minutes, I'm already flunking out. But then, it's like going back, I think maybe that was the right choice, because over the next 9 years, I made $31,000 in pay, so it was like $300 a month, which led me to move into a treehouse in there. But part of the, I was right on. This is the farm, which is the largest working vegan commune. That's where I was inspired. That's where I learned about tempeh. It was in Tennessee. It was 1,600 vegans. They called them pure vegetarians. Vegan wasn't even in the lexicon then. But they had a guru there, Stephen. They took a lot of drugs and they ate a lot of soybeans. And they wrote the Farm Vegetarian Cookbook. But they did a lot of cool stuff. And they really, like Light Life, Wildwood, some of these other big brands were all started from the farm. There's my tree house, early tiny house. And, like it was said, I was really failing for 15 years and trying to be this sort of business guy that I thought a business guy was supposed to be. And then, Tofurkey was just like, why not? And, what could it hurt? Like, let's be fun. Let's have some fun with this. And, it was just like, for me, it was like this moment where I could finally see through. I could see the road ahead. And, the Greeks have two names for time. They have chronos, which is chronological time, and then kairos, which is like this moment when time stands still and you look ahead and you can finally see your way forward. And that's what Tofurkey was, and it is today. There's our great new plant that was largely the work of Jamie and the fabulous work he's done there. And now Tofurkey's sold all over the world in 25,000 plus stores, 7 continents, including Antarctica. So it's really an amazing thing to see. Now I want to talk about the present. So that's the past. Let's talk about the present. Here's what are the signs or what's happening in our vegan world right now? And this is data that I've gathered personally in the business and then also from traveling all over the world. I love this little slide here, which is here's all the meat and then the vegan things all sold out. Very anecdotal, but that's what's happening. So, refrigerated meat alternatives in mainstream supermarkets. Mainstream supermarkets love it when they grow 1 or 2% a year. They see a category like the last 5 years, which is meat alternatives, that has been growing at 3 or 4 or 5%, and they're like, we got to get more of this in. This is crazy growth, like it's double what we're doing. So it's easy to place your things. In the last 2 years, they don't know what to think of this market right now. Which is just spiraling. The last I saw was meat alternatives for the last 12 weeks were up like 45% from the last year, which is like a crazy number for that. And the reason for that, I have to say, is that I think the taste and the texture has gotten so much dramatically better. We say taste is king, price is queen, everything else is marketing, but it's really, taste is the portal into people's hearts is what we do, because people like to eat. And I think some of like that Oberlin guy that tried to sneak in the pepper, they like to enjoy their food. So plant-based milks, what's happening in plant-based milks? First of all, I want to thank Taylor for this work there, and I hope he had a vegan teacher, because Taylor thought that milk belonged in the non-safe category over there, apparently, along with paint and arsenic, which it kind of does. So animal milk consumption since 1996 to 2016 dropped off 25%. So the new motto of the dairy industry has been down so long, looks like up to us. But it's, this is the champion of plant-based foods, is the milks, which is really, meat alternatives and everything else is less than 1%, and milk is 13% of all milk now sold in retail is plant-based, with 20% predicted by 2020. So big things happening in milk. Plant-based yogurt, same thing. Look at that, crazy growth, 55%. Plant-based cheese, thanks to Miyoko. Look at that. The first plant-based cheeses that came out, well, they weren't that good. It was like animal-based cheese. I'm sure it was the same thing. They've been out for thousands of years, and we've been at this cheese game for really 25, 30 years, and the old joke used to be, and it's sort of a wide-known joke now, but anyways, we'll go for it. But it was. Did you hear about the fire in the cheese factory? Cheese still didn't melt. The next day it was fine, So that was the thing. But Miyoko's changing all that, and because her cheese melts, and it's just fantastic. So that's a jet stream right now. Plant-based cheese is going crazy. Vegan mayo. I didn't know mayonnaise was the #1 condiment. Did you? I thought it would be more like ketchup or something, but vegan mayo is doing the same thing, 26%. So you're seeing crazy growth now. A lot of that, I give credit also to the Plant-Based Foods Association, which we have now. And I know that there's, it helps to have a lobbying force. We have 115 companies now in the Plant-Based Foods Association. It was founded by these 5 companies that you see here: Tofurkey, Upton's, Miyoko's, Dea, and Follow Your Heart. And though all of those 115 companies, like Campbell's is one of them, so obviously they don't do all vegan, but 3 out of the 5 board members need to be vegan companies. So we control the Plant-Based Foods Association, which is really a bright spot and done a lot of good things. Here we've seen that. By the way, that was all over Finland, that you can get any McDonald's in Finland, you can get that. And same way Sweden's all over with that. And the McVegan burgers meeting expectations in Finland of McDonald's and doing way more than they thought in Sweden. So that's great. But like she said, there's some of the 54 products, like right across the street in the grocery store, 54 products of meat alternatives. There isn't a grocery store in America with that many products. A lot of them are like oat-based over there, pulled oats. So it's amazing what's happening in Scandinavia. Scandinavia is also the home of Oatly. Who knows Oatly? Oatly is an oat-based milk, and I get on the plane flying out of Helsinki. I open the plane magazine, and here's these ads are all in the plane magazine, and it's for Oatly, which I love that one, which is the copy. I'll read you right here. This tastes like shit, blah, blah. That's a real comment from a real person who tried one of our oat drinks for the first time. They think it tastes like oats because it does taste like oats. Here's the good part. If you don't like the taste of our oat drinks, you don't have to drink them. Taste is personal, which is why we don't take it personal if you don't like how it tastes. There's a growing number of people who find oat drinks delicious and who can taste the balance of protein, fiber, unsaturated fats, and carbs, and know that it makes them feel good. So give it a go, and if you don't like it, give it to someone you don't like. That's what... That's what business students call a win-win. It's just awesome cutting-edge marketing, and then they have the big billboard up there. It's like milk, but made for humans. So great job, Oatly. You go to the UK, it's unbelievable what's happening in the UK. I've been over in the UK a bunch. The last 2 Januaries I've been there. Veganuary, which is Matthew Glover and Jane Land, has done great things. We're hoping to get it started over here in the US. London has so many vegan options, it's unbelievable. My 2 favorites are the Temple of Hackney, which is you've been there. Yeah. They make this incredible fried chicken that now they've done such sales that Kentucky Fried Chicken is doing a pilot program where they're trying to make the same stuff. It won't be as good. It's right next to a meat shop. There's big queues out the Temple of Hackney, which, by the way, used to be the Temple of Satan. They thought that was too edgy. And they changed it to Temple of Hackney, but there's always lines out there. The other one that's a vegan doner. You know what doner is? Anybody know doner? It's like a Turkish burrito, and it's a kebab. These guys are in the Box Park over by the tube station in South Park, and it's just amazing stuff. They've been voted the best kebab in London, not the best vegan kebab, but the best kebab. This January, the Tofurkey sandwiches are going to launch in Veganuary in 500 Sainsbury's stores, which is crazy because they love their sandwich over there, and they love their vegans, so we're very excited. This is Australia. Australia has become the 4th biggest market for vegan foods right now. Domino's, you can go into any Domino's and get a cheese pizza, but even better is they were inspired by Gigi's, which was a company that was an Italian food restaurant. They were making meat and dairy-based pizzas, and they decided, we're going to go vegan. And that's a big jump for a business who has a sustainable business model to go, but they figured out that they had to go vegan. I know Joanne MacArthur tried to go there. She couldn't get in because you got to get there right at 5. There's big lines, and it's very much in demand. Right down the street is Gelato Blue, which did the same thing. They were doing dairy-based gelato, and now they're doing fabulous gelato. So Australia is alive and happening. This is a list that I've been updating every year. I just updated it. This is vegan restaurants per capita in the US and world cities. Portland, Oregon, yay. Most vegan restaurants per capita. And world cities, you can go down there, the Prague, which is the most per capita, but it's London, #1 in the world with 128 vegan restaurants. And that is 24 new ones that have opened up in the last 12 months. And there's more opening up every day. New York City is closing in on them, though, and they opened up 14 new ones in the same amount of time. So vegan restaurants going crazy around the world. And I think there's 24,000 restaurants now in America, vegetarian restaurants, and 1,200 vegan restaurants, so amazing. So with all this good news, there's going to be pushback, and the Missouri Cattlemen's Fake Meat Law is now on the books, but it's such a poorly written law, and I know Amanda where are you? Has been working on that. Thank you very much. And she's been saying that, the way it's written is there's 114 counties, I guess, in Missouri, and any one of the attorney generals in that state could just say, we don't think this meets up to the law, and you can forward it. So it's being on hold now, and we're looking at the constitutionality of that. But we really wanted to fight it because, we didn't want other states to get any ideas. And Iowa's already said, we're watching this closely. So, Missouri is sort of a bellwether state. So hopefully with your help, I can't thank you guys enough for that. It's really awesome to have your help. So great job. There's also even worse. Canaries, by the way, is bullshit. I call them bullshit in French. This is the French labeling law is even worse. This one, specifically says you can't use the word sausage. You can't use the word steak. And it's the whole country. And they're going after people. We have small little online shops that are getting phone calls from the French government. These guys are like tiny, and they're being hassled with that. The butchers are under attack over there. There's vegan people that are going out and really hassling the butchers. There's a big article that I just saw the headline of, which was great. It was like, butchers demand protection from vegans, which is funny when you think about it. They're the guys with the knives, and they want that. This, if you can't read French, this is like the slaughterhouse of Limoges is the real butcher, which is really the case. So France coming alive. This is, of course, with milk being 13% now, Scott Gottlieb of the FDA pointed out, an almond doesn't lactate, true. And Stephen Colbert picked up on that and said, the first person that can work an almond doesn't lactate into their wedding vows gets like this huge prize. And it was 24 hours later, this guy complied and worked it into his wedding vows. So those of you getting married, you might want to consider putting that in there. But they're trying to crack down on, the FDA is trying to crack down on defining milk, so that's a big deal. Bottom line, first they ignore you. We've been ignored 15, 20 years at Tofurkey, laughed at. Hello, we make Tofurkey. And now we've arrived at the fight stage, which is one stage from winning. And this is where you come in as lawyers. So you guys have a bigger footprint now in the future than just about anybody. We're all in this together. We're working hand in hand with you, and we're working towards this vegan future. But you guys are supremely important and supremely appreciated. So thank you. Okay, I've made sort of the past case, the present case. Now I want to talk about the vegan future. So this is, a fool's game for sure. And one thing about the future is it's very unpredictable. But we have gone at Tofurkey and created a means to go to the future. So I have gone to the future and I've seen the future. And I'm going to finish up with a couple of headlines that I think you might find interesting. First one is from October 12th, 2035. And it is the pyramid. And the story, which came out in the New York Times, read, "Eat your veggies," used to be a wishful command from only well-meaning parents. Now it comes with the full backing of the U.S. Department of Agriculture, who announced their much-anticipated new dietary recommendations today. The department revises its dietary recommendations every 5 years and has been moving in plant-based directions for the past 6 cycles, based on new medical studies showing the benefits of plant-based foods. U.S. Surgeon General Jack Sherrick commented, "This is a great first step in aligning government diet recommendations to the food scientists that have been telling us for years." So, we tried to get the last time this came up was in 2015, and we tried to work getting them to agree to it. Just how about put in there, don't eat so much meat, but it didn't go, and it was right before the PBFA started, so that's happening. Next one. Herbivores celebrate end of farm subsidies to animal-based meat, April 20th, 2049. The story goes, Congress today repealed all subsidies on agriculture related to the slaughter of animals to be used for human consumption. Pressure has been mounting for years from the powerful plant-based foods lobby headed by Sarah Schinner, with 65% of our citizens now eating 100% plant-based diet. It is long overdue, and we remove these subsidies to enrich a failing industry, said Sarah. Taking the same no-nonsense approach as her famous mother, Miyoko, Sarah was able to secure low-interest loans in the bill to be used for plant-based food startups, as well as increased subsidies on nuts that will greatly aid the $78 billion nut, milk, and cheese industry. Good job, Miyoko. Okay, Mars, the first all-vegan planet. With a population now of 1,420 former Earthlings, Mars has a lot of mouths to feed. With limited resources in space, the intense cultivation of fruits and vegetables in greenhouses is now serving as an example to Earthbound residents of the efficiencies and the health benefits of a vegan diet. We are all quite happy with the abundance and quality of food here, quoted Mars Secretary of Agriculture Elias Gunther. Obviously, running precious grains through animals would be both cruel and inefficient. We hope our work will serve as an example throughout the galaxy. They're not going to take cows and pigs up in these spacecrafts for 9 months. Come on. That's going to be a vegan planet. Extinction facts now required on all labels and meats. March 4th, 2059. Congress overwhelmingly passed today a law that makes it mandatory for any company selling packaged food in the U.S. to include extinction facts label detailing the impact of this food on the planet, including habitat loss, water use, and greenhouse gas release. This will greatly aid consumers in making eco-friendly choices at the grocery store and pay off in a huge way as we continue to fight the effects of global warming, said Vegan Evan, U.S. Secretary of Agriculture. A more controversial law requiring cancer warnings on all animal-based meats was passed last year on the heels of the now famous meat tax bill of 2055, championed by Senator Reed Sherrick of Democrat of Arizona. So we got that to look forward to. Congress, September 21, 2066, Congress passes massive retraining aid bill for factory farm workers. As factory farms and meat processing plants have disappeared, the need to retrain workers in these industries has been a growing concern. While most were able to find jobs in the rapidly expanding plant-based and cellular meat processing industries, Congress has passed a massive jobs retraining bill for those wishing to acquire other skills. Some of the retraining courses will be in the exploding solar industry, urban farming, and wave energy producers, which are all seeing numbers grow. So, Senator Kaylee Hessler, Democrat of Oregon, co-sponsored the bill with Senator Macy Jenks. Good job, Kaylee. All right, national parks and solar farms taking over unused grazing lands. With the end of animal agriculture, the question of how to utilize previously used grazing lands has been a constant question for those living in rural America that previously depended on ranching as a vital source of income. Now, 10 years after the closing of the last slaughterhouse in Oregon, many communities such as Burns, Oregon, are seeing an uptick in the local economy as tourists flock to the newly expanded Malheur National Wildlife Park. That was the one taken over by the Bundy crew like 2 years ago. And just want to point out that to this date, no vegan company has ever taken over a national wildlife refuge demanding more land, because we got enough land as there is. That plus the government's tax incentive for wind and solar farms on ranches has made Malheur County in Oregon a dramatic example of how things can change for the better. Photo credit from We Animals Group Limited, offices in London, England, Toronto, Canada, Lagos, Nigeria, and Geelong, Australia. It's a big corporation now. All U.S. fast food chains now 100% plant-based, February 7th, 2009. Burger King, the last national U.S. food chain to sell animal-based meat, followed the lead of McDonald's, Taco Bell, and Country Fried Chicken and rolled out its all-vegan menu today. All four chains have been hit by massive closings as Behemoth Veggie Grill has continued to chip away at their core customers. Veggie Grill now has 38,849 restaurants worldwide, according to James Permanathos, CEO. Oh, here's a nice little chart. Restaurants serving animal-based meat in sharp decline worldwide, February 19th, 2115. Once the king of protein, it has become harder and harder to find restaurants serving animal-based meats. Since the withdrawal of meat subsidies in 2106 and the meat tax of 2108, our sales have plummeted, reported Don King, and current CEO of Ruth Chris Steakhouse. People always compare our prices and the quality to the Impossible Steakhouse next door, and we just can't compete. Max Permanathos, head of LA-based Mercy for Animals, compiled the above list based on data received from the famous Where's the Meat app. So you can see it's going to be harder and harder to find a meat restaurant. Where's the Meat site goes bankrupt November 6, 2115. The once popular phone app, Where's the Meat, filed for protection in Chapter 11 bankruptcy today due to the lack of restaurants selling animal-based meats. The app had been quite popular with a small but passionate number of carnivores who at last count were estimated by the AC Nielsen Company to number about 1% of the US population. It's been super helpful finding a restaurant that still says animal-based meat, especially when traveling, said Andrew Trump, great-grandson of ex-president. Said Andrew Trump, great-grandson of ex-President Donald Trump, who was impeached in February 2019. I never minded driving across town to find something to eat in New York City, said Andrew. All right, it's official. There are no more active slaughterhouses in the U.S., according to the USDA's National Agriculture Statistics, which published its annual slaughter summary today. As plant-based foods and cellular meat alternatives have surged, the slaughter industry has been in rapid decline since 2020. U.S. President Genesis Butler was on hand today in Springdale, Arkansas, as what was the largest slaughterhouse in the world formally closed its doors today. I want to thank the Animal Legal Defense Fund for their tireless work bringing the great day for animals into fruition. I am also happy that the Smithsonian has agreed to exhibit this building on the Mall in Washington, D.C., so they may never forget those animals who perished. Genesis was then teleported back to the White House, where she planned to host a massive state dinner for a legion of activists. Okay, here's my closing argument. This is gettable. Like, these sound crazy and they're funny, but at the same time, we are now at our big Kairos moment in this world. Just like there was this Kairos moment for me when time stood still and we could see our way through. I can see the way through for plant-based foods now and for everything that we've been working for. There's nothing on here that I've said that is not doable. And it's hard to predict a timeline, but this is all gettable if we put our shoulders to the wheel and do this. And I want to leave you with this last little quote from The Sun magazine, which is one of my favorite magazines. That somebody sent this to me on the day, actually, that Trump was elected. And it's been sort of my guiding light since then. And it says, resist thinking that this is all there is. Realize that for every ongoing war and religious outrage and environmental devastation and political lie, there are 1,000 counterbalancing acts of staggering kindness and generosity happening all over the world, right now, on a breathtaking scale, from flower box to cathedral. Resist the temptation to drown in fatalism, to shake your head and sigh and just throw in the karmic towel. Realize that this is the perfect moment to change the energy of the world, to step right up and crank your personal volume, right when it all seems dark and bitter and offensive and acrimonious and conflicted and bilious. There's your opening. Remember magic and finally believe you are part of a groundswell, a resistance, a seemingly small but actually very, very large impending karmic overhaul, a great shift, the beginning of something important and potent and unstoppable. Thank you very much.
Seth Tibbett. Wow. Okay. What an amazing beginning to our conference. Thank you, Seth. So now I just want to invite all of you to enjoy the rest of our reception this evening, talk to each other. I believe there's still food out there, drinks. And tomorrow we start at 9 o'clock. We will be in this room, although I think it'll be bigger. And we are ready for the next 2 days of a wonderful conference. Thank you all for being here. Thank you, Seth. And we will see you in the morning. Thank you.